Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Batwoman, the latest episode of Supergirl, as well as the latest episode of The Walking Dead. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Batwoman, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl and or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Walking Dead. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Batwoman. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I really like that this episode kind of shows you, obviously, like, heroes don't always have the same motivation. It's not like Kate did this whole, getting in the Batsuit situation because it's like, oh, I'm here to save Gotham, I'm here to save the day. It's like, no, she came and did all of this because she was trying to save one particular person. That was Sophie. That was someone she loved. I mean, still loves. And even now, it's like her motivations by using this Batsuit is because it's a means to an end because she believes Alice to be her, sister Beth. And that's what this is like. That's her purpose. She's not trying to be a hero. She's not trying to replace Bruce. It's like, eventually, I think in her mind, it's like Bruce is eventually going to come back and pick up this mantle. And then after that, things will be copacetic in a sense that everything will kind of go back into its own thing. But for now, she'll do this. But it's interesting because I think what's going to start off as a situation of like, oh, I'm just doing this for these particular reasons is going to grow into so much more because it's something because she was so focused on like, oh, I'm here to, this Alice situation. She didn't see what this meant for the entire city of Gotham. Gotham has been without a Caped Crusader for 3 years, and she didn't realize how much people have been pining and hoping for. I mean, obviously, they just turned the Batlight off like last episode, so that just shows you how much this city's been holding on to hope for Batman. I mean, I'm not going to talk about every superhero's motivations, but even amongst those and, this whole CW Arrowverse situation, it's like Oliver didn't start off necessarily wanting to be 100% a hero, but then you take someone like Barry and Kara, they jumped at the opportunity to be a hero, to do more, to help people, which isn't to say Kate's not going to, but I think it's going to be an interesting route for her to kind of, like I said, start where she is right now and grow into the hero that Gotham's going to need. So I just think that's kind of interesting. And I also think it's kind of interesting where it seems like there's a parallel between Kate and Luke in the sense that they have a need to almost prove themselves because, it's like, Luke has had to, the comparison to his father, because even he's like, all these gadgets in here, I don't really know how to use them, half of them myself, because obviously that's something like, it's like, no, that's the only one who knows how to use them is Batman, which I am curious what his dad's status is. Is dad gone or whatnot in his continuity? Or is he just somewhere else doing, I don't know. I'm curious because the fact is that he's kind of taking care of things. Like I said, it seems like he kind of took over for his dad. So it might be the thing of his dad might, I wonder, does he typically end up passing away in the continuity of like the comic books and stuff like that? Because I know in the spoilers for the Telltale game, I know he dies in the Telltale game. So I don't know if that's typically like some, might be some of his storylines, maybe it's all of them. I didn't even know Lucius Fox was a character until like the Nolan Batmans. That's my first introduction to him, and then obviously Gotham. So like I don't know if he's still like a relatively new character in typical Batman continuity, or has he always been there for us? Actually, something I should look into. It was actually kind of interesting having Kate just randomly drop that fact of like, oh yeah, I think Alice is Beth. Like the fact that she dropped that during a family dinner and everyone's like, wait, what? But her dad didn't even want to believe it. The fact of the matter is there was like a skeleton that was found that had DNA that was hers. So it's like, okay, like Kate's the only one willing to kind of give this theory a chance because it's like the Garnet, jewel in the knife and everything, which is also interesting too because like Alice kind of lost her shit because she was super upset because she lost that knife. But now when you think about the context, it's like, well, that knife is significant because it has that gem in it and it's probably a reminder of her past and everything. I do like, it seems like there's some form of sanity, but at the same time insanity, and then like in her character because it's just like the way she talks and stuff like that. Because I'm curious like how much like her Wonderland gang really knows, because it seems like Dobson's is like the only, that dude, he seems like he's the only one that knows because she was like, my father, and it's like he wasn't shocked. I mean, they're a boyfriend and girlfriend, but still, it's he's one of the few people probably in the gang that knows her true motivation because he's like, we're supposed to kind of basically turn Gotham upside down, basically because they have their motivation or just because the way Gotham treats those who are less fortunate. It's like, it's not like Gotham is a good, like they're trying to, I guess, expose the flaws that is the system that Gotham is built on. Like obviously the rich are at the top and the poor are at the very, very bottom. Which I once again bring up the fact is interesting to me because obviously that's similarities to Joker in a sense. Like that, those are some things or themes that Joker kind of tackled to a certain extent. So I think it's just kind of like perfectly timed with like all of this. But regardless, it's the whole thing of that being their main plan. But the fact is, he was like, you're losing sight of it. You're becoming so focused on this. But for her, this is her big motivation, because her big thing is like, my dad gave up on me. I was like, that's what this is all about. You're pissed because it's like, for 15 years, because she even talks about it later on, I was hoping that someone would come and save me, and no one did. My dad gave up on me, and she wants to know why. And to pay him back for giving up on me, it's like, I'm going to burn everything that you built, make it so that you're all alone like I was, And it's actually sad, too, because we actually learned that Kate actually she carries this weight of blaming herself because she's like, I was scared. Beth went to check on mom. What did I do? I crawled out to safety, and I didn't reach out to her all the way because there was part of me that was scared of like, maybe I'll fall over too. And it's like, which is, you're a kid at the time, but that means for the past 15 years, she's carried that weight. That's why she's so desperate to save Beth, because it's like, I should have been there. I should have saved you back there, in that guilt. So it's not just Bruce that has guilt over that situation. She does as well in her own right. And I thought that was just kind of a fascinating and sad aspect that she has to carry that guilt. I do like that she hasn't really 100% figured everything out. That it's actually kind of interesting because, like, it's just like, no hero has it 100% figured out at the beginning. Like, she's well trained enough, but still, like, this whole bat situation is super new to her. So even like the suit being bulletproof to her caught off guard, she's like, all right, that's pretty dope. But I brought it up last episode. It does seem like other aspects, like the whole grappling people and kind of disappearing thing, like she's kind of got that down to a T. So it's like, I guess some other aspects are still kind of like, I can jump on this pretty quickly because I guess Batman enough just from an outside perspective that you can be like, oh yeah, I can do this too. But still, it's just kind of interesting when you kind of think about it in the grand scheme of things. When she got attacked later on to get the knife back, I was like, oh, did Alice go through all that for? I was like, huh. And even Alice said later on, that wasn't me. I was like, it was Dotson, wasn't it? But I was like, why would he do that? Wouldn't that kind of go? I don't think he'd do anything that would go necessarily against Alice. So that's why I'm like, huh. Which obviously we dive in. Well, I'm skipping around a lot, but it is interesting to find out because Kate starts thinking about it, like, if it wasn't Alice who took the knife from me, who was it? And lo and behold, who was it? None other than her stepmom, Mary's mom, which that was kind of interesting. It's like, okay, so why are you doing that? What are you hiding? Why don't you want him to know that it's actually Beth that's actually alive? Not unless in some shape or form she has something to do with that disappearance, which that makes your brain go like, all right, how far are we going to go down this conspiracy alley? Could it be a situation of you were trying to get rid of Kate's mom and sister, that basically you wanted him all to yourself? Like, what were your ulterior motives in this type of situation? Or is there something else there? Like, has she known about, Alice / Beth's disappearance? Did she actually have a hand in it? Like, how far are we going to go down? Because, like, what other reason would you do that? Not unless her reason is just because she believes Kate and she just wants to protect her husband from having that difficult situation of, like, you got to put Gotham before your own needs. And if he found out the truth, if it was verified that this was Beth, he'd approach this very differently. And it's like, we need a heavy hand in this situation, not kid gloves. I guess it's kind of potentially a route that could go down, but this is so interesting. It never even crossed my mind to even think it would be her. Like I said, I thought it was Home Dude that was behind it, like trying to kind of get Alice back into this, back into where she's supposed to be in the grand scheme of things. I think it also does this very interesting, complicated thing that is it builds upon, like, I think a combination of Kate and her dad's complicated relationship, but also like why he did stop looking for Beth, because he saw what I part of me wonders, did he cover that whole thing up with Beth? Did he actually, because like, was there actually stuff found to say like, oh, Beth is actually dead? Which, to be fair, maybe her stepmom, Mary's mom, is the one behind all of this. Maybe she faked the DNA and stuff like that to kind of ease Jacob and everything that he was going through, because obviously Jacob, it seemed like more so than anything, like when he saw the map that Kate had drawn and everything, because part of me was thinking like, if he had given up hope, it was because either one, because he saw what kind of impact this obsession was kind of having on Kate, that the fact of the matter is, if necessary, she would have spent her entire life looking for her sister, and maybe he didn't want that for her, that he didn't want that to become everything there was for her. So, but that in itself obviously drives a little bit of a, creates tension between her. Like, I think on some level, because Kate seems like she's the only one that ever kept holding out hope of, like, we never officially found her body, so we don't know if she's actually alive or not. But her dad kind of accepted it and moved on. And, I'm sure that pisses her off even more, because not only did he give up on me, he moved on. He got remarried. I'm sure she doesn't, because I like that. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing where it's like, oh, she's going after Mary because Mary is the new sister in Kate's life. It's like, you're my sister and my sister alone, so she doesn't get to have you. But also, it's just the fact is that he went off and kind of started a new family to a certain extent. Obviously, that's going to, upset Alice/Beth, to a certain extent, all in its own right. So, which even that leads to a complicated situation with Mary, because Mary looks at it as a thing of, like, she always felt like there was a little bit of a rift. Like, it's like, I was never really your sister. I was always someone that you kind of pretended didn't exist, which obviously Kate kind of feels bad about. But for her, it's like, because even last episode, she was like, holy crap, like, you're doing all this, like, secret medical stuff, you're helping out people, and you could be in big trouble for it. But like Kate opponent pointed out, the fact is, I was like, wow, you actually have a lot more depth to you. So, like, kind of showing that maybe she didn't think the highest of her sister, but at the same time, it's like, because when you have something like that, because, like, her relationship with Beth is different too, because it's that love, it's that twin thing too that has to be accounted for. It's like losing her sister was probably like literally losing part of herself. That's probably what it felt like. That's why, probably that twin connection is also why she held on to hope this entire time, because she felt something that no one else could ever feel about it. Like a connection that her dad couldn't have, a connection that only exists between her and Beth, Which I also like that line, that conversation between Sophie and Kate, where it's kind of like, whoa, are you that person in the bat suit? Because obviously she's the only person that knows, like, oh, that person in the bat suit is a lady. So, but obviously Kate kind of denies it and whatnot, being like, if it was me trying to, rescuing you in a dramatic fashion, I'd be dressed up as Wonder Woman. Which I like that, just because I like little references like that, but also because it makes you go, okay, so, trying to decipher which heroes exist in what universe and whatnot, which I don't know. Well, because Oliver referenced the fact is he didn't believe in the whole Batman situation because he felt like he was the first one to really do that, which isn't to say Wonder Woman doesn't exist in his universe. Maybe she's just not the hero that most people on a lower level might be aware. Because it's really interesting, because obviously, like Barry and Oliver typically are a part of the Justice League, so we don't know if, like, the Justice League exists in this continuity. We know the Justice Society of America does. So the fact is, it's like, have the heroes ever come together to, accomplish things together, or have they always stayed separated? That's a big question. I mean, the Justice League might not exist in this continuity, because we know that Diana and Bruce have had relationships, in different continuities and stuff like that. Once again, it's probably me just reading too much. It could have just been a simple thing of just kind of like a wink and a nod to Wonder Woman, but it could have just been a thing of like her literally being, regardless. It was just interesting. I'm just like, oh, it's always neat to know like who exists in this continuity and who doesn't, So, I mean, who's to say there might not be a Justice League on Earth 1, but maybe there's a Justice League on Earth 38, for example, that type of thing. So, regardless, it is interesting, that conversation between, like I said, Kate and Alice, trying to understand everything about, that line of like, because Kate doesn't know whether to believe Alice or not, because she herself, because she is a little nutty. That's why I'm also curious, like, because that's the thing. There's like 15 years of unanswered history for her. So it's like, and I brought it up before, like, did she get like captured by the Mad Hatter? Hence the whole Alice in Wonderland theme. And typically, so I'm curious, is that an angle they're going down, or did she just become Alice on her own? Like, what happened in that time? Like, how she ended up starting this gang, like why she has the support that she does. So like, obviously there's a lot of story there, but like a whole thing of like, she doesn't make things clear cut of like, oh, I'm absolutely your sister, but it's heavily, it's like, that's definitely got to be your sister. Not unless it is going to be a twist where it's like, no, she is just crazy, but believes she's your sister. Maybe someone kind of put that in her head. Like I said, like there's a lot of conspiracy you can run up the chain throughout all of this, just where we at with everything right now. So there's that. But I'm also curious, like, who blew up the thing as it was transporting her. You would assume it has to be Mary's mom because she also has something to do with the knife. So I guess it's more so about covering up. This has to go down. This has to be connected to what happened 15 years ago. And some, like, not unless she's actually a bad guy secretly moving some strings or, puppeteering some stuff behind the scenes in Gotham. Maybe she got mixed up with the wrong people and that's connected to Alice. And so to kind of hide her connection to them, she has to make Alice go away. Because we do know there's a lot of court of owls type of thing that goes down in Gotham City. We don't know whether or not that exists in its continuity. Has that already been dealt with? Could it be dealt with in this continuity? Like I said, because Batwoman's continuity, her stories isn't something I'm familiar with from the comic books. This is my first real introduction. So there could be things specifically tied to her story, not necessarily 100% tied to Batman that, might be related in this particular case. But, we'll kind of have to go down that route because obviously there is a third party at play here. I also thought it was kind of interesting because that last episode I brought up, I was like, okay, so what's a GCPD situation like? Obviously we got a little taste of that in this episode because Jacob was screaming at them because it's like for things to kind of go down the way they did, there's something going on between the Crows and the GCPD. So once again, we still don't know the status of things of like who's in charge, like I said, what the Commissioner Gordon continuity is in that regard, but still. Obviously, Kate's also got to deal with the complicated situation of, Sophie, because Sophie ratted her out when she was like, no, let me just talk to Alice, buy me some time. But it's like, yes, obviously she does it because she cares. But at the same time, it brought up something I thought was kind of interesting where she was like, I've never lied to you. Like, it's like, oh, did you lie about what your situation was to the military? Which part of me thinks like that there's a part of me that wondered whether or not there was some interference. Like, hey, there's a part of me that was wondering if Jacob was behind it. There's just some part of my brain that was like, he wanted them to kind of break things off. So I don't know. That's part of my brain because we know that he positioned Kate to be in a position to be in the military because obviously it set things up because he wanted her to kind of have a desk job where she wouldn't actually see any action. But part of me wonders, like, did he kind of do anything in that Sophie situation? Did he kind of pull some strings in that regard, or did someone else do that? Because the fact is, it does seem kind of like it almost kind of, because I feel like Sophie would have chosen Kate over the military. I don't know. It just seems like there's something there, and I think we'll kind of dive into that more plot-wise later. It's just interesting because there's this whole thing of everyone telling her to move on, whether it be her dad, whether it be Sophie, of kind of like, leave us in the past. I'm happy now, but you can tell her hesitation and stuff like that. I guess, for Kate, it's like, Sophie's the one that got away, because we don't know how much time necessarily was in between then and now. It's been probably a couple years most likely. But even like Kate being like, if I'd known you were going to get married, I would have come back. Not to, be happy for you and kind of like, oh, enjoy the wedding. It's like, no, I would have been here to stop it because I know what's in your heart, whether you're willing to really see it or not. You say you don't love me, but you do, So, I mean, because you wouldn't have this like conflicted energy about you if that weren't the case. Because I'm wondering, does everyone else know, like obviously does, Mary's mom as well as Jacob, because like the conversation came up about like, oh man, I can't believe Sophie's married and stuff like that. Or at the very least, she's engaged, right? It's not that was she married? Yeah, she is married. Sorry. But then it's like, oh, like they kept kind of telling her to kind of calm down with the conversation. So they must know about Kate and Sophie's past, but regardless. I also think it's kind of a neat element of making it so that Alice does know that that's Kate in the bat suit and everything, because the whole aspect of her, like later on referencing like, you've got our father's eyes, but at the same time, it's like you could tell because she was touching her face like under the water and everything, and like, oh, I know it's you. And I thought that was kind of neat because it adds this element, because I even love that conversation where she's talking about the fact is like, oh, I might seem a little crazy, but the fact is you're running around in a bat suit, which is interesting because that's what a lot of people label Batman as. They'd be referencing like how nuts and crazy he is. So I think that's kind of an interesting parallel they're going to make. That the fact of the matter is maybe I'm not all right in my head, but the fact is you're doing what you're doing, Kate, must mean that you're not all right in the head either. That maybe there is some commonality that maybe Alice is like, this might mean that I can bridge out to you, that maybe I can, even more so where things stand now, I can get you on my side. So that's my thought process on it. So like I said, they set up some very interesting things, and I'm curious to kind of see the follow through, especially like I brought up earlier, the whole thing of Kate not wanting to be the symbol, kind of picking up that mantle and kind of giving people hope. Because now people are like, well, we saw Batman now, but Batman hasn't come up again, which obviously, she has, but obviously no one knows because she's kind of kept that under wraps. Because even Luke's kind of like, you don't want to get Gotham's hopes up for you to just kind of stop all of this all of a sudden once this whole Alice thing is figured out. So I think that's going to be a neat element of, like I said, what steps is she going to take now that it's becoming more of a thing of like, you are giving Gotham hope, but what are you going to do with that? Are you going to step up to the plate, or are you going to step away? And it's, like I said, that's going to be an interesting aspect to her story. So I'm very interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Supergirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we kind of continue the whole situation between John and his brother. And that's a whole complicated thing because obviously, Kelly is helping John look into his mind to kind of figure out, because basically it turns out there's actually like this little special like Martian curse that gets cast upon like other Martians when they try to attack one another on a psychic level, and ended up causing both John and his brother pain. So in turn, at least this whole thing of her, the whole lens thing from Obsidian that they're using to get inside of his brain, and obviously it manifests as his office space, and there was all these books. But if you do notice, it's not just the ones that are in front of us. There are actually quite a few blank spots. So it's like, yeah, someone definitely altered his memories to the point he doesn't remember he has a brother. Eventually they dive deeper into it because, obviously John's scared because it's like, the fact is, what if I find out something I don't like? But obviously last season, Jimmy had to confront his own past. Obviously, like after everything, being shot and everything, he was scared to confront it. But thanks to his sister, he was able to face it and become stronger because of it. And because of that whole situation, it passes that on to John, and John ends up diving into his memories and finding out that his brother was working with the White Martians against him. And we actually learned a little bit of history too, like that this goes back way back to like two brother Martians that eventually their essential beef led to the divide that led to the war between, the divide and war between the Green Martians and the White Martians. So that was just kind of interesting on many different levels to kind of hear that, history. It's always neat to kind of learn a little history there, here and there about, Mars. And so on top of all of that, he got this memory of like his brother altering people's minds and turning against him with the White Martians. So the thing is like, okay, so his brother was a traitor. That's why he ended up in a Phantom Zone. But then there was a part of his memory that was like, brother, you're still in the dark about so much. So now the big question is, well, who would do this? Because obviously it's a big sin, as John says. But then that must be one of those big regrets his father had, that he probably did it for his sake. And, it's like the shame it probably brought upon their family. But also it could just be a thing of like, there might be lines that John himself crossed that might not be something they wanted John to have to live with. Maybe he did a lot of stuff during the war that, you're better off forgetting type of thing. Either way, I'm interested to really dive into that. Like, what is it that John is in the dark about? What that's all going to be revealed to be. What's also interesting about his brother, too, it seems like his brother might kind of have a split personality thing because he was talking to himself in the mirror. So either like, yeah, that's him having a split. But it was interesting, like in the mirror, he shifted into Kelly, but on the other, in real life, he didn't. So that's why I'm like, so either he has a split personality, which that wouldn't. So like, well, I mean, it might not necessarily be a split personality. He might be delusional. Or there might actually be another Martian inside of his head. Well, because we know that he was working with a White Martian, but he was like, you killed my ally. So it's like, that's the thing, you're a Green Martian working with a White Martian. I mean, which doesn't say much because, I mean, obviously, like, where things currently stand, John was too, because, him and Magan had gotten close. And then on top of that, Magan's helping with the other, like, stopping everything that was going down on Mars as well. So it's kind of like, it's not like that's big of a stretch, but it's like, I don't know, especially the fact that he's coming out of the Phantom Zone. It's like, how did you meet up with this other White Martian? So what's that all about? Like I said, he said his ally died, but it's like, was that true? Did they fuse together, or like what was that all about? What was also interesting too is he talked about the fact that he no longer has a special ability to incept, kind of literally probably taking the thing of inception and just kind of warping your mind to being what you want it to be, which is interesting because it seems like that's kind of similar to what Lena's doing now. We'll kind of get to that soon enough, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. that like apparently when he went to the Phantom Zone, he lost that power. I wonder how. Maybe like going into the Phantom Zone, maybe before going to the Phantom Zone, they stripped him of a lot of his powers and just threw him in there. Here's how long he was in there for. So there's that. There's also Kara having it, obviously, like, balancing this Supergirl thing. She found a good balance to it, but now it's kind of a little bit harder because she's got Andrea, who's got her own ambitions and how she wants to run things. And obviously, at least before, she had Jimmy there to kind of back her up. So it's like, okay, I can kind of duck out when I need to be Supergirl because Jimmy totally understands. But now it's like, well, you know, the only person there that she can really like click with about that whole Supergirl thing is Nia. So that in itself lends itself to a complicated, you know, new dynamic, because it's also like Andrea wants to run Catco her own way. And so she's put like, I'm curious. Like, it seems like she kind of goes out of her way to be hard on Kara. I mean, we haven't really seen her interaction with anyone else, but it just, either it's because she has high hopes for Kara, so maybe it's one of those things, I'm hard on you because I know what you're capable of, or maybe it's because Kara did kind of stand up to her last episode, and maybe her business side of things is like, oh, I got to shut that shit down. Like, I'm in charge, you got to learn who's the boss. I don't know, maybe like Andrea, it seems like Andrea doesn't like people questioning her authority. It's like, I've run businesses, I know what I'm doing, you're not able to see my vision. But that's the thing, like, they're going to butt heads because Kara's vision for what Catco has been and what it is and what's at the heart of it isn't what Andrea has plans for it. So that's a whole thing, you know. So obviously there's the William thing, which William was following Kara because he thought she saw something. It's like some Dr. Niles thing connected to Andrea, which now I'm sitting there thinking, did Andrea steal someone else's technology and not wanting to kind of put any connections there? Like, there's some dirty secret there, maybe, and that's why he was like, oh, he thought Kara was paying attention because he thought she was looking at the computer and he thought maybe she was diving in. But it's like, no, she wasn't paying attention to that. She was looking into something else. He followed her, which is so interesting because Kara kind of gets in trouble for not doing her job when it's like, you weren't necessarily doing your job because you were too busy following Kara around. But still, nevertheless, I guess because, you know, once again, Kara's under a little bit more scrutiny. Because I think also for Andrea too, it's like you're part of an old regime because Jimmy's going down too. So like I said, that might be me reading too much into the situation, which is highly possible because I tend to read too much into certain situations. But regardless, there's that whole aspect of it. And I'm like, I don't know. Because at first you're kind of like, yeah, William's a D-bag, because it's the whole thing of like, yeah, he is trying to tear her down and whatnot. It's like, oh, you think I'm going to be an ally or whatever, a friend? And it's like, you better find support somewhere else because I'm just doing my job. You should basically be focused on doing yours, which Kara, you know, talking to John kind of realizes like, no, people are going to try and tear you down. All you got to do is let them waste all their time and energy trying to tear you down. You do your job and prove how good you're at it. So that chalk it up to all that. So it just straight up seems like William is a D-bag, but then later on we see that he's working at like a soup kitchen or something. So it's like, okay, so obviously you're not that much of a dick. So why are you a dick at work? He brings up that whole conversation about his wife and everything. And it's like, things kind of make it seem like there's definitely something there. Like he isn't what would be it? Like there's definitely something there, like about that whole wife conversation. Either he's trying to hide some fact about his wife that maybe he's not really married. Maybe he's just created this persona about himself to make himself seem more awesome than he is or something. I don't know. Like there's definitely layers to him in this whole situation. And I'm kind of interested to dive into like what that's all about. Why does it seem like he's shitty at work, but it seems like he does care about people. So he's not completely another asshole. So it's like, well, okay, what's up with that? Also, like this episode obviously dives into relationships and stuff like that too, because Brainy is trying to make the perfect breakfast for Nia, and he does, but it's like, wait, this is the best day ever, but that means like compared to anything before or after, so he's kind of living up. I have to live up to the standard, but he kind of goes a little overboard with it, which Nia tries to set him straight. But obviously, Brainy being who he is, because he's never been in love like this before, and because he is, you know, the way he is, he takes things very literally. So he's just like drowning her in poetry and stuff like that. She's like, you are the dumbest, smartest person I know. And he's like, thanks. You know, so it's just because he doesn't know how to really take he hasn't really understood the context of things, which is kind of interesting because he's learning like the way he's going about things compared to like Alex, who learns like, oh wow, Kelly's allergic to blueberries. I made a blueberry pancakes and all this other stuff. It's just like, oh, I'm kind of screwing up. I don't know her too well. And now it's that thing of like, oh, because like, you know, because this is still, you know, so new and fresh, she doesn't know Kelly that much. But for her, it's like, I like her so much. It makes me kind of forget like, oh, we haven't really got to that process of like, oh yeah, we still are in the process of learning about each other. But I think it already speaks volumes about itself, and the fact is that when John's brother was pretending to be her, she immediately touched her hand and knew something was off. It's like she didn't feel that jolt. So probably that feeling, that electricity, you know, that she probably felt before, and then she confirmed it with the blueberries. So. And obviously Kara, being Kara, immediately goes like, yeah, I know you're not my sister. So that was interesting. In the grand scheme of things. And I did like it. It's like, oh, hey, and then lo and behold, it's kind of that thing of like, wait, I'm the real Kelly. No, I'm the real Kelly. Easily, you know, well, not really easily, but, you know, Alex, I think pretty easily figures it out, because it's like, you know, the moment the other Kelly was like, shoot her, like her Kelly was like, we'll just wait till someone else gets here so we can figure this out. Like, the fact is, you know, that spoke to who Kelly is in that moment. So I thought that was pretty dope that she was able to kind of, you know, Alex was able to, like I said, figure it out pretty quickly. So there's so many elements to this whole, you know, thing that, you know, I really like. I need to look up that song that was playing in there. I don't know what it is. I like that song. I don't know, certain songs just hit you and you're like, you go like, oh man, that's, I don't know, it sounds like a beautiful song. Gotta look into that. Gotta hear that full song. It happens from time to time. So regardless, I thought that was all kind of neat. And then there's the other side of things. Well, a small detail in this episode I thought was kind of neat was, you know, really quickly getting to it is, apparently Jimmy is running for senator and whatnot. So it's like, okay, so potentially putting himself in a political ring. I forgot what there was, that other thing that he was trying to get accomplished. And Kara's like, oh my God, you literally quit Catco like 12 hours ago and you already got so much on your plate already. I think it's going to be interesting seeing Jimmy go down the political route and stuff like that, because I think he also has clout behind him, in the sense that, like, well, for one, not necessarily clout, but he has a lot of prestige behind him, because it's like, hey, you ran Catco, you're also Guardian, so there's that whole angle of like, people know who you are and what you represent and what you stand for. So that, I'm sure, is going to be a helping force with everything. So there's that side of things I'm kind of interested to dive into. But another aspect to this is the whole Lena side of things. I was super surprised when we find out she's the one that kidnapped Eve. I didn't expect that. I thought that had to do with whatever that Leviathan thing is, which we're still kind of keeping that a little kind of down low, because I'm sure that's not going to, who knows, that might be something that won't pop up really until late in the season, or till much later, till everything with John's brother and everything's kind of dealt with, because that seems like the main thing. Maybe the Lena stuff, it seems, because the Lena and the Leviathan stuff might kind of like go hand in hand, but regardless of all of that, obviously Lena doesn't want to listen to, you know, Eve when she's trying to explain, like, no, like, the fact is I had no choice with that whole situation. I was just doing what they wanted me to, which is like, it's hard to say, because it did seem like Eve wasn't just playing a part. It seemed like she legitimately was kind of enjoying the evil doing she was, but it did seem like, as we saw in season 4's finale, she was put into this position working with Lex and everything that was part of someone else's, Leviathan's plan, whatever this organization is. And obviously Lena's not willing to listen to her, but obviously there was truth in that matter. Then obviously there's beef between her and Andrea, because Andrea is kind of like, oh, you're trying to, you know, thinks she's trying to copy her technology to a certain extent. So it's like, basically, you don't want to make an enemy out of me, because you still owe me a big story. You don't want to end up becoming the big story. So that's probably going to be a little bit of a thing going forward. But I can see, because Andrea's got her visions on how she wants things to kind of run, because I think that kind of shows you in the grand scheme of things of, like, she immediately was at Catco, she walks down and goes to Obsidian, so it kind of shows you, like, I think kind of showing, like, how on top of everything she thinks she is, but at the same time, I think, kind of, in my mind, it kind of shows you just how much more important Obsidian is, because even Kara was like, the commercial for Obsidian, it's what Catco's meant to be. It's supposed to be kind of like a giant advertisement for, oh, look at all this great stuff we're doing at Obsidian, and not even like the more political stuff that should be the main focus. There was that lady at the beginning, which that was kind of shitty of her, literally walking and not even paying attention, literally causing an accident that could have led to people dying, and she just kept strolling along. No one stopped or anything. It's like, that was super shitty of her. Like, at the very least, be more mindful, but still. Which, like I said, this season is going to be a very like humans versus technology, whereas last season was very humans versus aliens type of thing. So, in this particular case, kind of continuing that conversation, is that fact is that Lena wants to rewrite human beings. She wants people to be like, in a sense, they're like, oh, you're programmed to do no harm, which is like, yeah, the fact of the matter is you're meant to be logical without emotion, which I think Lena kind of forgets. You can make the argument that because people get controlled by emotions, terrible things happen. But good things happen too because people are dictated by their emotions, because they feel what they feel. Because of your emotions, you're able to feel empathy and sympathy to another person. You kind of remove a lot of emotion behind a lot of things and try to look at things from a logical standpoint. I mean, that leads into like your very like trolley type of situation, the good place, kind of, always kind of keeping like moral philosophy in your head is a whole aspect of like, okay, here's a train. Are you going to go down the route to kill this one person? Like you have to switch the track. You can only do one or two things. You can either go towards a one person or you can go towards a 5 people. It's there's a logical aspect to be like, oh yeah, kill this one person because it means saving the most lives. It's not. I mean, but that's the thing. There's complexity that's to morals that, which obviously for some people is very black and white. I like to think that there is shades of gray to the whole situation, but a machine won't think like that. And that's the whole thing. Like it'll think from a logical standpoint, and a human being can think about things from a perspective of something going down the route. And it's something Brainy, was talking about, the fact is, when he was talking about Nia, is like, you make me feel like I can do the impossible. A machine might not think of the impossible. A machine might go like, might think, oh, we only have these 2 routes. Maybe someone else could find that gray area. Obviously the whole point of it is, the moral implications of which one will you choose. Obviously it's kind of not the right fit for what I'm trying to use as an example, but you get what I'm trying to say, that the fact that a human could find that gray area. But Lena is so caught up in her own emotions that she's trying to say like, oh, we'd be better off without it. Humans hurt because of emotions and stuff like that. The problem is, I think Lena just never learned how to properly deal with her own emotions, because the Luthor family just doesn't deal with emotions. They're very like handle things their own way. So it's like I don't think she has the proper tools ready to deal with that, So regardless of that, it's just the fact of the matter is what she ends up doing. The whole Eve situation, obviously Eve later on admits like, yeah, I did enjoy what I was doing and stuff like that. And it's like, hey, you are being truthworthy and stuff like that. So it's like, okay. But then you see the thing on her head went from like red to green. I'm like, that probably can't be. And it's like, oh, you're mapping. I thought she had already messed with Hope's brain. Not Hope, but Eve's brain. I thought she had already messed with it. But no, it was for the purpose of like, oh, I've got it fully mapped now. And it's like, oh, for what purpose? Oh, because I'm injecting hope into you, which begs the question, is Eve dead? Did she completely get her mind completely overwritten by hope? Which is super messed up, and that shows you how far Lena is willing to go. Like I said, you're trying to say things aren't ruled by emotions. You are literally ruled by emotions. You need to try. This all spirals from the fact is that you were hurt by someone you considered a friend, a group that you considered friends and family, that you were going this far. Like, yes, Eve wasn't the best person, but to go that far and so basically erase her to implant her with like your AI's like brain, which, that's not going to go in well for you, because it's going to get to the point where it's just kind of like, oh, humans are broken and need to be perfected. You, Lena, think that you're above it all, but you need to be fixed. There are going to be major, major ramifications for this. You can already see it, because that's the whole thing of people being scared about AI getting too smart and too advanced, because they'll get to the point where AI is like, you're the problem. Like, no, that humans are beyond fixing. Doesn't matter. No. Honestly, the logical route is to wipe out humans. Leaps and bounds, I'm sure, and I'm jumping way ahead, but that could be a route we go down. It's still, like I said, it's super messed up to think that Lena is willing to go down that route to potentially do that to a lot of people. That, like I said, that leads to some very interesting implications of where this could potentially go over the course of the season. But to do something like that, and also that leaves you vulnerable because she was warning you about a threat you weren't willing to listen to. Not unless Hope has access to all of Eve's memory. She might not, because I think she probably has access to, well, you would assume so, because she has access to her brain and stuff like that. Like I said, it all comes down to whether or not Eve is still alive or not on a technical level. Like, can Hope be removed and then like, oh, Eve's okay? Or it's like all that was Eve, her personality, her brain and stuff is like that. It's like the knowledge she had is intact, but her memories, everything that made her is gone forever. I don't know. Which, like I said, that's going to lead to some interesting things when this whole Leviathan story potentially like bubbles back up and turns into whatever that's going to turn into. So there is a lot of storylines going on at the same time, and I'm so curious to see kind of ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I really like how this episode is literally the opposite of the previous episode in many different regards. I mean, because it's just obviously where, our hero's stances are on everything as to where, the Whisperer's stances are with everything. So it's just interesting because obviously this episode is obviously set in the past and in the present day. Obviously kind of seeing everything kind of come full circle. We actually get to see the beginning of the Whisperers, like with Alpha, Lydia, and Beta, and just kind of like their first time meeting him and everything. And obviously, Lydia's a child, so she's scared. She's blocking out the sounds of like the walkers and everything, but her mom makes her put your ears down because I don't want you to be afraid anymore. I want you to be like me. And it's so interesting because obviously like Alpha pushes this whole thing of like, oh, I feel nothing. It was even interesting hearing Beta being like, the only song he ever wants to hear never end is the song of the walkers. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, you kind of find out later on why that is, because someone that was very important to him, whether it was like a son or whatever, someone that was very important to him was turned into a walker, and maybe that's why. It's actually interesting because it's almost parallel to like, to a certain extent, you can make parallels to Herschel, because remember, he kept so many walkers locked up because in his mind, he believed that they can come back. But this is the opposite end, because I obviously, like, Herschel kind of believed in life, like, oh, maybe they're still alive, they still have their souls or whatever, like, we can't kill them. Whereas, the Whisperers and Alpha in particular believes that, it's like, this world belongs to the dead and we need to walk with it. That, like I said, they believe in death, whereas everyone else believes in life. And that's actually kind of that's an interesting parallel. I don't think I really took time to really even think of even last season, but I think they're kind of leaning into that this season, that ideology to a certain extent, whereas like most people are fighting to live. It's like we're already dead and everything, so why not walk amongst the dead? We are the end of the world, so it's just an interesting parallel in my head. But breaking everything down throughout the episode, obviously they're trying to gather up more, as they say, guardians, and they bring the sisters along, and one of the sisters, and I'm glad they included that flashback because I probably wouldn't have remembered that's the one that had to give up her baby and leave that baby behind, and she's struggling with that. And obviously Beta's like, we need to make an example out of her and kill her for that, but because there's a little bit of dissent amongst the groups amongst the Whisperers to a small extent, because they saw life. It's like, oh my God, there's people, they're living in houses, they're growing, there's life. Because in this world of death, and it's kind of interesting if we actually think about it, like, Alpha basically started her own cult. You can make the argument Negan started his own with the Saviors, but this definitely feels very cultish in what she believes and stuff like that. And especially to see where it started, the literal roots to it being like everything that went down 7 years ago between her, Lydia, and Beta, and just to think that it's grown into the massive thing it has. So over the years, they've collected more people, made people realize that this is the only way. This is the way of the world. You kind of have to go with it. It's basically, and Alpha said herself, it comes down to those who are brave enough to walk amongst the dead and everyone else. That's how she categorizes it. It's like I said, they walk the path of death. They're saying that this darkness created a new path for them to walk. And the fact of the matter is, we'll kind of surround ourselves, dive deep into that darkness, and like I said, once again, you make the parallels between everyone else who's, fighting for life, especially because, like, obviously you have Daryl and everything last episode, not wanting to, kill anymore. It's just like every time we come across people, it's like it always ends up in a fight for survival. It's like, can't we find other people who just want to live like us? So it's kind of like choosing a path of light and life, where the other is darkness and death, So that was interesting. But it seemed like, because I was curious what Alpha was going to do, but she kind of forgave the woman, because it's like, I get it, you had to give up a child. Because there's also stuff going around, I'm like, oh, she killed Lydia. I'm like, but she did. I was like, because I kept thinking, like, do they mean that metaphorically because she left her behind, she's dead? I thought that's what it was. It's like, no. everyone legitimately thinks she killed Lydia because she couldn't bring herself to do it. But because she's a mother herself and couldn't 100% let go of her own child, she was willing to give that sister another chance, just because she even told Beta, it's like, you would never know what it's like to have to leave your child behind, have to, do all that. So it's like, of course, that's why she was willing to give her a second chance. But that sister decided to not, she's like, oh my God, Alpha's so great, I'm not going to falter again. Sister, did you really meant what you said, that you wish that you had left me behind? I don't think that was true. And she never actually told her sister, like, no, I didn't. She just rolled over. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's hard to say, because the whole thing is about feeling nothing, kind of closing off your attachments. You're not supposed to feel anger. You're not feel sadness or fear or happiness. Just feel nothing, because that's all the dead feel. They feel nothing. They're driven by instinct and need to feed, So there's that whole situation. But that sister in particular, who had to leave her baby behind, ended up snapping because she saw a walker with like a little baby, I don't know what you call that, baby carriage thing on her front, and it just probably brought it back, because it was also Alpha that said, bring her along. It's like, I could have left my baby behind, but you had a reasoning for all of this, and it pissed her off, because it's like, no, the fact is, you made me bring my baby. This is all your fault. I think the argument could be made that she had planned in advance, that, she knew she was going to do that. So, and it just, she couldn't let go. She was thinking Alpha was so great, but in that moment, she just, a mother leaving her child behind, and she ends up attacking Alpha, and her sister defends Alpha and pushes her and leaves her. And I guess you can make the argument that it came true, because she was like, oh, do you wish you left me behind? In that moment, she left her sister behind. She chose Alpha over her sister, because her sister no longer believed, and obviously that was spread, because we saw at least one of the other whisperers being like, yeah, but that place, it's full of life, we can go back. So there are others amongst that rank who believe, but this whole situation might have shifted that to be like, no, we better get back in line, or so that's an interesting thing. And in fact, I'm curious about it too, because later on that particular sister becomes Gamma, so it's like, who's Delta? Is there because with that whole thing, like, because obviously it's Alpha, Beta, is there one for C? I'm not, if you do know, I'll probably end up looking up to myself, but I feel like I don't know, because I know D is Delta, so it's like, is there one for E? Maybe. It's just interesting. Maybe Gamma is the next one in line, amongst that, So I'm curious about that. But regardless, and it's interesting too, because even Beta's like, you're just using her as a replacement for your daughter, because he comes and follows her and sees she's got this little big nest and everything, and it's like, Lydia's actually alive. You're hoping that she'll come back, but she won't come back. Like, the fact of the matter is, you didn't kill her, even though you lied to everyone. But for Alpha, the one who claims that, like, oh, I feel nothing. But even back then, she's talking about, oh, feeling nothing. But we see how distraught she is when she thought her daughter was gone. It's like, okay, yes, you are no longer free, but don't you ever leave me again. It's so interesting, all this talk about leaving people behind. It's easy to do it when it's someone that you don't care about. You're willing to teach other people, oh, leave the other people, but no matter what the situation is, you're always going to love your daughter, and I think that's going to complicate things later on. Because I was curious, because I was like, is she going to kill Beta because Beta knows the truth? It's like, no, they can never know that Lydia's alive. How are you going to well, eventually that confrontation is going to go down, and people are going to see, wait, Lydia's alive. She lied, and that might be what shifts the balance amongst the Whisperers. Maybe. I don't know. That might even push Alpha to be like, no, to prove myself, I have to kill my daughter this time around. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see, where that takes us. But, to see her, like, so distraught like she is, she's never really shown that much emotion. She's just always been calm. But to be fair, she, like, hit Lydia plenty of times, so it's not like she can't say she doesn't feel anything. She feels anger, because it's like, oh, you left me, how, you're my daughter, like, it's so weird, because it seems like Lydia found freedom away from her mom. Her mom makes it seem like she's like the dad. I need nothing. It's like, but you need your daughter so much. Like, no matter what you try to do, you can't pull yourself away from that attachment. So, but now I guess after everything in the episode, she kind of found herself kind of finally like, oh, I am free. Like, being a part of the dead means we are free from our attachments to everything that was connected to life. So maybe she's moved on from her daughter. I doubt it. There's still, like, the fact is that it took it made her so angry that she ends up destroying the nest. Maybe that's her way to be like, oh, I'm done. I'm not worried about Lydia anymore. It's like, no, that was a moment of anger too. So, you were freaking out, you were breaking down. So it's like, holy crap. And we even learned that the skin that Beta wears comes from that person that was important to him, because it's like, I can't leave them behind. It's like, you won't have to, which maybe that'll eventually be the thing that Alpha does. It's like, oh, I kill Lydia, I'll wait till she turns, and then I'm going to skin her, and then her skin will become the skin I wear. That way she'll always be with me to an extent. Maybe not. I don't know. What's really interesting too is the fact is that you never actually see Beta's face. Like Lydia and Alpha have, but no one else has, because they lifted his mask up all those years ago and she saw what was underneath and then put it back down. We never got to see it, which makes me think that's going to become plot relevant, because obviously we know that someone came across the border without and left their skins behind. So obviously there's people sneaking about and stuff like that, which means Beta could, because obviously that was, like I said, last season that was a thing, because the multiple groups didn't know each other. That's why Beta was able to kind of sneak in, because no one recognized anyone. But if they were as tight knit as they were, they'd be like, whoa, this is a stranger. Who is it? Beta was able to take advantage of that. So maybe they could, like I said, I brought it up in the premiere, like I don't think that's something that could ever happen again, because the groups are tight again. But I get the feeling like the whole Beta thing is going to flow into something. I mean, because even Daryl went toe to toe with him, but still doesn't know what he looks like, so that still could play into something. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see on that front as well. I feel like this is the first time we've ever gotten to really see the background to an antagonist, because we hear about Negan's stories, but we never actually saw any of them. And obviously, the Whisperer's beginning is something they haven't talked about. So it's interesting that a villain got its entire episode to kind of give you backstory to everything that they created. Because obviously, more so than anything, Alpha and Beta and Lydia's stories like the most important ones, because they're kind of like the catalyst to what is now the Whisperers, So I just think that was just kind of interesting. Like some villains have gotten they've gotten backstory, don't get me wrong, like whether it be like the governor or whether it be Negan, but I feel like not to the grandiose scale that I feel like the Whisperers are being built up to. I mean, like I said, those trio being kind of like the foundation of everything that it is now. So what I thought was interesting too about the whole Gamma situation is the fact is that Alpha try to spin this to Beta, be like, yeah, we lost some people and we lost a herd that guardians that we're trying to gather up. But the fact of the matter is, through that chaos, there was clarity found, and that was the sister. It reinvigorated her belief. It showed that, like, oh, how dedicated she is. And maybe that dedication in itself from Gamma is what's going to snap the others into place, like, oh, crap, like, she's super dedicated. I mean, hence why she's getting registered as Gamma. Because the whole point was like, oh, we're going to leave names behind, which is interesting, because it's like, oh, she's A, he was B. What made them decide to go? I mean, that might mean that, in the grand scheme of things, Lydia might be Delta, which is interesting, because Alpha gave up her name. She got Beta to give up his name. But what about Lydia? Lydia kept the name Lydia. So there was some part of her still holding on to Lydia's life. In the grand scheme of things, she even had said it herself that Lydia was dead the moment she was born, because she was never like her mom. Like, she took after, probably, as the little bit we got to see of him, I'd say she took more after her father than her. So it's like, she was never like me, and I think that's what upsets her, because she was always pushing Lydia to be more like her. Be like me, be like me. That's the only way you're going to survive in this world, which obviously that's not the case. There's plenty of other people who are not like you that have survived, but maybe the argument could be made, because they're not like you, they've lost so many people along the way, and they get so bogged down behind it because they're driven by emotion of all that they've lost, where we don't get caught up in all that. I don't know. Like I said, that's my thought process in the matter, but I mean, it's interesting. Because it's also interesting too, it wasn't even Alpha who started the whole thing of wearing the skins. I think she learned from Beta, because of Beta putting on that person's skin. It set everything in motion of like, okay, we'll do that. Like, obviously the whole point is to cover yourself up so you can walk amongst them. Obviously that's something that's come up before, but obviously, like I said, they go to the extreme in the fact, because you're supposed to walk like them, think like them, become them, in the sense of you feel nothing. So I guess to kind of keep up that, I am curious where Alpha's mask comes from then. Her skin comes from, if that's the case. If Beta's has that type of connection, was Alpha's just like, all right, the next walker I find, I'm gonna skin it and put on? I don't know. I doubt everyone has a significant story behind theirs like Beta's. Like everyone else is probably just like, whatever walker I found that suited my needs. First walker I found, and oh, here's my new skin. You know, so like I said, it's just interesting to kind of get like that opposite side of things, to get that opposite philosophy where they feel like, you know, there's order to this chaos. They find it, or maybe they bridge it. They're basically saying like the world is chaos and we dive into that chaos and we create our own order amongst that chaos. You know, maybe, I don't know. It's just interesting where their mindset is compared, because no one else in the entire world of The Walking Dead, at least that we're aware of, thinks like that. That's something specific to them, yet they have the grand numbers that they do. But I mean, the complicated thing is like, you don't actually know how big their numbers are because they surround themselves amongst the dead, which makes their numbers seem bigger, which makes them the deadly enemy that they are, because they can become like the walkers, they can walk amongst them. And obviously, once again, the parallels of like I said, picking up like this episode literally being the opposite of everything we saw in the premiere, because the premiere focused on, you know, like I said, the life side of things. This focused on the death side of things, and to see those opposite sides kind of meet, with Alpha being there and Carol being there on opposite sides looking at each other. It's like they saw eye to eye. Alpha knows that they crossed that line, came to investigate anyway, but now knows for sure, and a war is starting, you know? And it's not like Carol made an effort to hide it, just kind of like, she saw Alpha first before Alpha saw her, but she made a point to say, it's like, no, she basically wants shit started just because of everything that she's lost. She's angry. You can make the argument because she's kind of controlled by emotions. It's led to this situation, but she wants to kill Alpha, you know, for not just Henry, for everything that they lost, but probably more so than anything Henry, because that cut deep, you know, and the ramifications for it. Like I said, it is interesting, you know, because it's like their camaraderie as the Whisperers, and obviously these, because obviously like I pointed out and, you know, praised that like cooperation they had at the beginning when they were on the beach and everything, fighting off the walkers and stuff like that. Them working together like that was phenomenal. But at the same time, it's like I said, there was like so much life and fun with the other group, but obviously with the Whisperers, it's almost, you know, it's almost like they snuff out that light of like, oh, there's a little spark of like, oh, maybe there's light, there's life there. Oh, we should go stomping into the ground and snuff it out type of thing. So it's just really interesting, you know. I keep using that word a lot. I use it a lot. Sorry. I'm just what they're setting up. I'm curious to kind of see like both these, like I said, these ideologies clash. I mean, you can make the same argument, like the same clash kind of happened with the Saviors and, you know, between Rick and Negan beforehand. So I'm also curious in the great scheme of things, like what's going to happen with all those satellite parts, which obviously they're trying to get some now, but obviously the Whisperers have come back to their territory and now they're, you know, preparing for war, and they're probably closing in on you because it's time, like, oh, you broke the agreement, it's time to clash, and you got to, because Alpha's going to set an example of them in front of everyone. Once again, like, oh, those who might look at this this faint glint of light, watch as I snuff it out, essentially. And that's how I look at it. But I'm very interested to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Because I'm wondering, you know, when the time comes, like, I think, like, Beta's faith in Alpha kind of was restored because she basically kind of gave him new life with all of this. So I'm curious, is that going to shift over the course of the season? I kind of get the feeling. A part of me wonders, is like, is he going to end up killing her, or is she going to end up killing him to kind of keep her secrets? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see in the end. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good